Cute or costly, furry or frustrating? How would you describe Utah's prairie dog? Hello again and welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. It has been a few years since we've dedicated a half hour to the Cynomys parvardens, the official name of the prairie dog specific to central and southwestern Utah. Prairie dogs are a member of the squirrel family and are only found in North America. Now, of the 5 species of dogs, only the Utah and Mexican prairie dog are threatened. So why take the time to talk about these burrowing rodents again? Well, it has more to do with the way that they are now managed here in Utah, especially in areas of Iron County. So we begin today with the basics, covering 2 questions. Who benefits from the plan changes and how complicated is it? Here's Rhea with the report.
For residents in southern Utah, the Utah prairie dog is either a cute little animal that you find burrowing out by the hiking trails or pesky little varmints wreaking havoc on your private land. For the landowners with a prairie dog infestation, it has been a constant struggle on what to do about this type of ground squirrel that seems to populate the land like rabbits. In 1970s, as southern Utah was growing and expanding onto prairie dog habitat, the prairie dog population dwindled down to around 2,000. So the Utah prairie dog was put on the federally endangered species list due to the fact that this particular species is only located in southern Utah. Once put on the list, efforts were put in place to regrow the population. At that time, it became illegal to kill, trap, or move prairie dogs, even if they lived on your property. According to recent studies, the population has grown to 21,000 animals roaming free on public lands. Yet there has been an ongoing battle in the court system on what to do about the ones populating the private lands. Rules and regulations have changed over the years regarding the trapping and relocating of the prairie dogs. In fact, one lawsuit almost made it to the U.S. Supreme Court. However, regardless of court cases, a new plan now benefits both the dogs and the private landowners. Previously, only a certain number of dogs could be trapped and relocated, or in some cases, not allowed to be moved at all. This would leave some behind to repopulate. Remember, they're like rabbits. The new plan now allows all the prairie dogs in an infested area on private land to be trapped and moved to newly established protected land tracts where they can grow and flourish. It's a win-win situation that allows the prairie dogs to roam free while allowing private landowners to do as they see fit. When we come back, Chad will weigh in on this new plan with the panel and see how it's affecting the counties in southern Utah. For the County Seat, I'm Rhea Rossi Booth.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the prairie dogs and an updated recovery plan or management plan that's been in place since the spring. So far, we've looked at the basis of how it works. A little later in the show, we'll see how it's working on the ground. Right now, it's time to talk about policy. To join us for that conversation is Laura Roman, who is the Deputy Field Supervisor for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Thank you for joining us. And Chris Kelleher, who is the Recovery Program Director for the Division of Natural Resources here in the state of Utah. Thank you both for joining us. You guys work a lot on this together?
We do.
Yeah, we have for the past several years. Yeah.
You know, you got each other's like cell phones and
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
meet for lunch a lot. Okay. What has changed in the Prairie Dog Management Plan from, say, early this spring? How is it different now than it was just before the plan was implemented?
Well, I think in kind of a nutshell that the previous, we had a previous, what we call a habitat conservation plan in Iron County, which provided the process for developers to get what we call clearances for prairie dogs on their property. That plan was done in 1998, and over time we found some problems with it, some difficulties that the county had implementing it. And then there was an interim state management plan for a couple years that tried to address some of those concerns that the communities had. And so in this new general conservation plan, we've tried to combine components that worked from the old habitat conservation plan and the state plan to try to provide a plan into the future that actually works for people and for prairie dogs.
So if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service plan supersedes other plans, how does the state plan get in there to work?
Well, the state plan was an interim plan based on a court decision that allowed the state to have management authority on non-federal lands for prairie dog. That decision was overturned, but in the interim we did have a state plan that was put together with local elected officials and local municipalities, and it functioned well enough that when this new plan was put together, when the decision was overturned and the federal government got management authority back, the new plan recognized the value in what the state had been doing, and a lot of those activities were incorporated into this new plan. And another thing that was incorporated into it is in order to keep costs down for local landowners and developers, the Fish and Wildlife Service allowed us to credit funding that is going from the state to recover Utah prairie dogs to offset the cost of some of those impacts.
So I've got a piece of private land, and I'm getting ready to build, and the prairie dogs beat me to it, and they build there first. What were my options last year to be able to proceed on building? What were my options to get the land clear?
So last year being under the state plan, there was no what we call mitigation requirement for that property owner. So the property owner would just need to report the loss of dogs and habitat to the state just for tracking purposes, and then they could build. When the court returned authority back to Fish and Wildlife Service, we have, of course, other regulations where we have to be able to show mitigation. And so there's now a process in place where a landowner works through either the county or through us directly to implement that mitigation, and then they can clear. And the mitigation is really just payment of a fee, which then those fees are used to offset impacts by developing new prairie dog habitats on federal lands.
How do they actually get the dogs off the property? Do they just give them an eviction notice, or do they just start digging and they run?
We wish that it was that easy.
We've got some really good staff in Cedar City working on prairie dog in the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and they go into those areas. They'll get, when somebody applies for a permit, they'll go into those areas and trap as many dogs as they can off of those areas. and then move them to these newly developed translocation sites that Laura referred to on federal land. So.
Yeah, and I should just, say that the BLM and Forest Service are part of this whole process in helping us to create some of these new translocation sites and implement plague management for the species, because that really helps to get them established.
So I think I want to step back just a little bit and look at this. I guess I have one side question first. I live on a piece of property. I don't have property dogs, and they take up residence in my yard. Now what do I do?
So we actually have a separate, what we call a 4D rule for prairie dogs. And if prairie dogs are creating what we call a health and safety issue, which would include prairie dogs in a yard, they can be translocated away from that property. And the state is doing those translocations.
And that's just all done by trapping.
Yeah.
You don't pull a Bill Murray on them.
We want to take advantage of those dogs and get them to areas that are protected for prairie dog recovery, and then they count towards that recovery that we're trying to achieve.
On a broader issue of how we determine that species are endangered, I know it usually starts with a petition, a lawsuit from a group, or a challenge or something like that, and then you guys have to jump into gear and jump through a whole bunch of hoops and either determine it is or it isn't. How do you calculate numbers to determine that a species is endangered?
So there's actually several different things that you look at. It's not only numbers. You could theoretically have a species that has a very small population, but has no threats to that population, and so they would not need to be an endangered species or threatened species. So it's really about what the threats are. So when the prairie dog was listed, and when we developed the recovery plan, the most current one being in 2012, the primary threats right now to the species are ongoing development on private lands and plague. So we're really trying to work with those two impacts to get the species now to recovery.
So do you calculate populations differently? I mean, I have heard that when you're calculating numbers to determine if they need protection or not, you can only count them on federal land. The numbers on private land don't count. How does that work?
So all the prairie dogs are counted regardless of where they are, because we want to establish the trend of the population. But for recovery purposes, because development is one of the primary threats, we, in quotes, count the ones on federal or other protected lands toward recovery. But all prairie dogs are counted. And we're actually working with the state now on a population viability analysis to see where those really fit in. Okay,
so the rumors that I hear that say that a species may not actually be endangered, but because they only count the critters on public land, their numbers look like they're more endangered, and so they become listed, even though there are like 6 million of them living in Farmer Jones' hayfield.
I don't know if you want to jump in.
Our local Division of Wildlife folks are working very closely with municipalities and the counties in that area, and everybody in this partnership is really looking towards recovery and delisting and what we need to do to get to that point. And one of the big things is if we could count those prairie dogs on private land, that would add to our tally and help us get towards recovery. And one way to do that is to put in some regulatory mechanisms that would protect dogs in areas where people aren't interested in developing,
Even if it's private or?
Even if it's private, if we have those dogs protected to the extent that the Fish and Wildlife Service agrees that, with it, that then we can start counting some of those dogs towards recovery.
This may be an unfair question for either or both of you. How many species, prevalent species, are listed as endangered in the state of Utah?
43?
Yeah, it's somewhere around that, give or take. a lot of them are plant species. We have about half of our listed species here are plants.
I was going to say that I did not expect it to be quite that high, so I was a little surprised.
Well, it's actually, compared to other states, it's relatively low. We've done a good job in Utah at preventing new listings just by active conservation efforts that are ongoing and funded with state funding matched with some of the federal dollars that come in.
Do any of your conservation efforts that are implemented at state level actually spill over onto federal land?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we have a predominance of federal land, and we work very closely with the land management agencies, BLM and the Forest Service, to conserve our native species and help prevent them from becoming to the point where they need to be listed under ESA.
So until they become a threatened or an endangered species, usually it's the State Division of Wildlife that
the state has the mandate, Division of Wildlife, to protect all those protected species.
So until they're listed, your division's basically in the driver's seat as far as management of the species goes.
Right. And then when something gets recovered and is delisted, the Division of Wildlife takes over management authority again.
And I would say even with a listed species, we rely very heavily on our collaboration with the state to then get those species to recovery.
Right. So do they ever get delisted?
We are working on delisting several species at this time. We've got a proposed rule in to delist a plant species, Deseret milkvetch, occurs down by can't remember the name of that town, Thistle. Down where it got flooded down there. But and we're working on downlisting Junesucker from endangered to threatened. And then there's a number of other species we've also got in the works, and we're eyeballing Utah prairie dog for delisting in the near future. Just got to get all our ducks in a row and
our dogs.
That too.
There you go.
So what was the last species that was delisted? This would be good for people. This is going to be a quiz on this one. So
I want to say the McGuire daisy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you're
in
right.
Utah at least. Yeah. But like Chris said, there's a real effort now. Working together to work on some other species. So it's a real focus.
Any points we missed?
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us. We'll continue with our conversation. We'll be back in just a minute. We'll go on the ground and see what it looks like with the new program that has taken effect and how residents feel about it. We'll be right back with the county seat.
This is what adventure looks like, and here's what it sounds like. Southwest Utah's Iron County offers some of the most iconic trails within the state that include 200 miles of new trails to be discovered. Check out ironcounty.net for info and interactive maps for your complete guide to off-roading. Explore countless miles of trails in the heart of Dixie National Forest, the gateway to Utah National Parks, Iron County.
For 7 years, Utah's Community Voice has been the county seat, a program that looks beyond politics to spotlight the issues and stories that really matter to you and your community. Now you can help set Utah's agenda for the future by joining the conversation. Become a county seat sponsor and help support those conversations that are critical to the future of state government. Contact us at 801-947-8888 to make your contribution to help the voice of Utah be heard like never before.
Too often we find ourselves in shoes like these, or these. Wouldn't it be nice to change into something more like this, or this? How about these? Put on whatever shoes you prefer and come to Beaver County. We have exactly the adventure you need to put under them. So the next time you want to change out of these, come to Beaver County where you can jump into a pair of these. Beaver County, Utah. Lace up for adventure.
Welcome back to the county seat. So far today, we have spent our time talking about prairie dog plans and projections. It's time to meet the players in this drama personally. The people of Iron County and the Utah prairie dog.
Just a couple of years ago, we had most of these lots that you see that are all built on now were vacant, and prairie dogs just consumed the whole area here. The plan that we have now, the general conservation plan, has been really good in terms of being able to allow property owners to clear and develop their property.
It's going to be a lot easier for a developer to develop this property now that we're under this general conservation plan, because under the previous habitat conservation plan, take was limited to the amount of animals on a property, and as you can see, we have at least over 30 prairie dogs on these two properties right now, and that would have been a limiting factor for somebody to get a permit. They likely wouldn't be able to because take was limited. Under this new general conservation plan, take is just on the amount of habitat. It doesn't matter how many prairie dogs are there, and we'll try to get in and trap and relocate them in the summer. So our trapping season just began yesterday. It goes from July to August. If we do have fair weather in September, we'll be trapping through the end of September. Currently we have about 28 trapping requests, so we're just going to rotate around the valley and up to Panguitch and up to Wayne County as well, and try to trap and get some more prairie dogs out on the public protected lands.
So what we do when we get to a site is we'll usually assess the areas, look for where the prairie dogs are active.
We've had prairie dogs come over to our property here. They're trying to come in more often. They've been coming over here. Sometimes you see about 10 of them over here.
We'll just set up a bunch of traps, and we use cardboard and peanut butter and oats as bait. And then we'll just stick the cardboard behind this metal plate here, and when the prairie dog walks in, they step on this, that's what closes the gate and traps them.
They're not scared of you. They've kind of changed their habitat, so they're not scared. They run up into here, and you can get within probably 3 or 4 feet of them, 5 feet of them. They're not scared of you. It's a lot of sometimes you've seen about 15 up here, 10 to 15, it just depends on the day.
And you want to set it back a good, 1.5 to 2 feet away from the entrance of the hole. This gives them kind of time to come out and investigate the trap, and then they'll smell the peanut butter, which will kind of lure them in there. But once we see that we've caught any number of prairie dogs like we have here, then we pretty much just come out here and pick them up, and then we'll take them back to the truck and put them in the shade.
We appreciate the DNR coming out to help us out here this year to know what to do, because we had no clue what to do, because we know they're protected, we couldn't do anything, but they are causing a great harm to our business here.
Under the new plan, we're able to trap and translocate more prairie dogs. It's beneficial to all the counties in the range of the prairie dog that have issues or conflicts with prairie dogs. It helps aid in allowing development projects to happen, more flexibility for the state to trap in different types of situations, and just overall beneficial to the prairie dogs as well.
While most of the controversy over the prairie dog and its survival has been between humans wanting to build homes in the same places as prairie dogs want to build theirs, in reality, the threat raised by human habitat development is only one of several threats to the species as outlined by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Others include disease, predation, declining forage, mining, grazing, and so on. Efforts are being taken on all of these fronts to get the prairie dog off the endangered list. I'll be back with some final thoughts on the county seat in just a minute.
Antelope Island State Park. Think of it as a treasure island because of the unique activities and treasured experiences you'll enjoy there. Join the fun and excitement of the National Parks Band overlooking White Rock Bay on Saturday, September 22nd. Bring your chairs and friends to Antelope Island State Park for a beautiful evening concert by the National Parks Band. Tickets at friendsofantelopeisland.com. Discover nature, buffalo, historic Gar Ranch, and more at Antelope Island State Park. Visit plaindavis.com/antelope today.
all local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
Welcome back to the county seat. As well-intentioned as the Endangered Species Act might have been, it has fallen far short from being the panacea to address the issues of us humans inhabiting the planet with all the animals. And that's the subject of my 2 cents worth. You know, it may well be that the way I just constructed that last statement is the root of the problem. You see, if you look back upon all the listings of the species under the ESA, man-made impacts have been the main object of public debate regarding recovery plans. Examples that come to mind are the northwestern spotted owl, the Utah prairie dog, and the greater sage-grouse. We have been the scapegoat on all of them. It's a convenient picture to paint to raise funds and support for advocacy groups. Yet upon close examination, all 3 of these species have actually seen substantial numbers lost to other factors, namely disease and predation. When timber harvest dropped in the Pacific Northwest, the spotted owl still struggled because the barred owl is still feasting upon the eggs. Crows have a major impact on sage-grouse, and so on. The good news is that with each recovery plan, we learn more about the holistic environment which these species exist, and are starting to do more in other areas rather than focusing all the attention on the human-wildlife interface. That, in my mind, is a good thing, as is evidenced by the fact that several species, from the American red alligator to the bald eagle, have been delisted. So let's keep our eyes and minds open as we move forward on saving our wilder traveling companions on this planet. That's my 2 cents worth for today. Thanks for sharing the last half hour with us, and we invite your thoughts on this topic on social media. And we will see you next week on the County Seat.